Hi everyone, salam. I wanted to make a video today about my journey with modesty over the last few years and how I decided to eventually start wearing the hijab. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who left such nice comments on the last video. It was really unexpected. It was my first video on YouTube, so I wasn't quite sure what the reactions would be, but the comments were so heartwarming and so lovely. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much. I'm gonna, like the last video, try and split this one up into different segments because there's a lot of different stages in this whole journey. So the first stage, I guess, starts when I'm younger. As I mentioned in the previous video, I grew up in a very secular environment with a single mum who's American, and I love my mum so much. She's an incredible mum. There weren't that many rules and regulations at home when it came to modesty. My mum's way of thinking was pretty much she wants her kids to be independent, to make decisions on their own, and that's very much how we were raised. So it just meant that when it came to clothing and what we wore, we could express ourselves however we wanted within reason. And then I also went to a school that didn't require uniform, so we again could wear anything we wanted at school. I'd say I dressed pretty normally as a child, but then around 13, 14 I started to dress a little bit more provocatively. I didn't have anyone at home telling me that I couldn't wear what I was wearing. My mum was pretty easygoing, so it got to a stage where by 15, 16 I was coming to school full face of makeup, short clothes in the summer, tight clothes in the winter, heels, just kind of crazy, especially for that age. I was also quite athletic at school. I was very into sports, and so I think I had a sense of pride almost tied to that identity, that physical identity. And I never really felt too uncomfortable with how I used to dress. I mean, I did used to hate when I'd walk to school in the mornings as a young girl and get men making comments and whistling. I used to hate that so much, but I didn't really feel any particular shame towards dressing immodestly in that way. I think the first time I felt any kind of hint of shame was in Cyprus. I'd gone to Cyprus on holiday with my dad. It was very hot, summer heat, 40 degrees sometimes. I used to wear really short shorts and tank tops, and because I was getting close to the age of 13 or 14, looking back I can understand that it would have been viewed in a different light to how it would have been when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I remember my dad and his partner had had a conversation, and then the partner had come to me. She very gently explained to me that it's probably best if I start to cover up a little bit, seeing as we were in a village that was quite conservative, not so much in a religious way but more cultural way. And I remember I felt so embarrassed. I felt ashamed in that moment that the way that I was dressing could be perceived in a sexual way by older men or by men in general, because in my mind I was just dressing to look nice. I didn't really realize the darker implications of how I was dressing and how I could be perceived. So that was a bit jolting, but I went back to London dressing how I always did. At university, this is what I also mentioned in my previous video, I was around a lot of hijabi girls for the first time. In London, where I'd grown up, there weren't that many practicing Muslims, so no one I knew really wore a hijab. It was something that I hadn't encountered too much. So when I was at university, I was seeing all these girls, especially from like Pakistani, Indian, Bengali backgrounds, who were covered. And I had quite a lot of resentment at this time. I was very judgmental, and I couldn't understand why these girls were choosing to wear the hijab. And I thought, well, surely it must be that they're forced, or that at least there's some kind of pressure from their families. I just thought it was a bit of a shame. Why would you cover yourself? You should be proud of your body, especially if you work out, if you take care of your body. Why hide it? It didn't really make sense to me. But after a few years, my own ideas about modesty started to shift a little bit. Even though by this stage I wasn't religious and I had no clue that I was yet to become Muslim, I started really feeling a lot of anxiety around how I used to dress. So I remember every single time before I'd leave the house, I'd have this wave of anxiety, wondering who was going to approach me this time, who was going to come up and maybe try to touch me, who was going to try and ask for my number. It was just really unsettling to know that I was, because of how I was dressing, gonna attract those gazes and that attention, that really unwanted attention. And I think a lot of girls get this, especially in London. When you're in a big city, you're around people from very diverse backgrounds. And if you're putting yourself out there in that way with how you dress, you are going to be attracting more negative attention. So yeah, I remember specific things like when I'd be on the tube and the bus, I'd always position myself at the very back just to make sure that I could see my surroundings, that no one was approaching me. When I was getting off the train, I'd always make sure that I'd get off right at the end, just to make sure that no one would follow me as I'd get off and the doors would close. I'd also be constantly looking at shop windows to see if there was anyone following me. So a lot of that just built up, and I just thought one day, I hate this so much. I hate everything that comes with dressing this way. I like how I dress and I'm confident with my body, but I hate what comes with this. And it was causing so much anxiety and discomfort. And I also felt that it was really deflating to constantly be reduced to just what I looked like. And it was no surprise that I was getting that kind of attention because I was dressing provocatively. I wasn't just wearing, loose clothing. I was wearing tight clothing that showed my body. So I just decided, let me just try and dress differently. This is getting insane now. Why am I doing something that I hate so much? Why am I doing something that causes so much stress and that has such horrible implications? So I made the decision to start trying to dress a little bit more modestly. Things like wearing long sleeves instead of short sleeves, just pretty much covering my skin a lot more, wearing looser clothing, more baggy clothing. And it was a little bit tricky at that point because I felt that by dressing more modestly, I was losing that sense of femininity. I was terrified to even wear nice clothes, even if they were modest. I didn't want to wear things that were too nice, too pretty. I wanted to just dress a bit more tomboyish, hoping that, that attention would fade. And it definitely did fade. But there were also a lot of frustrating comments on the other end because I wasn't doing this for religious reasons, and because obviously no one thought that I was doing this for religious reasons. So it would always be comments in the summer like, oh, why are you wearing that long sleeve shirt? You must be so hot. Why don't you take that off? You must be boiling. And I'd be like, yeah, I am hot. I had one conversation with a girl who I knew quite well. She was quite feminist leaning, and she came to me, and she meant it in a nice way, but she came to me saying that she was concerned that I was losing that sense of freedom and that I was really restricting myself, repressing myself, and that it was a real shame. And I just remember thinking, wow, we have such different worldviews. I don't feel like I'm being repressed right now by dressing in this way. I know my experiences before when I was younger, and I know my experiences now, and this feels a lot better. One turning point that really solidified my views on modesty and my own modesty journey was when I was in Lebanon. I was in Lebanon with my dad and his partner. We were supposed to be going out to this event with family friends, and because my clothing was a little bit more on the boring side, my dad's partner wanted to take me out shopping to make sure that we could find a really nice dress, a short dress, heels, all of that. And we went from shop to shop, and she got me to try on all these dresses, short and tight dresses and heels, and I was so uncomfortable, and that pretty much just solidified it for me. I'm not into this. I don't want to be dressing like this. I don't want to be there to attract people's attention. It was also interesting to see her through different eyes, because when I was younger, I looked at her as this beautiful woman who dressed very, very elegantly, but also quite revealingly. And then I just was wondering about my dad's perception of this. How did he feel walking around with her? Was he feeling jealous that men were looking at her? Did he feel embarrassed? Did he feel nervous? Or did he feel a sense of pride, like, this is my beautiful partner? So I was quite interested in those questions, especially from a male perspective. How does it feel to have a partner who's dressing in that way? Fast forward now, a few years later, when I actually did become Muslim. At the beginning of my journey, I wanted to focus a lot on things like prayer and just learning a lot more about my religion. So I didn't really think of wearing the hijab. I actually assumed that it was something that you didn't really need to wear. I was also consuming a lot of content that pointed to differences in opinion. One of the videos I watched was one of the TEDx videos. If you type in something like, why not to wear hijab or something like that, there'll be a video that comes up on TEDx, and this woman, I think her name is like Samina Ali or something like that, but she talks about how it's not an obligation for women to wear the hijab. And so I had completely justified to myself that this was not something that I really had to wear. And during this whole time I was also toying with my own modesty journey, because I was still dressing modestly, pretty much everything just without the hijab. But I was also finding it difficult to navigate modesty from a cultural perspective. I'd grown up going to the US during summer holidays with my mum and my brother, and the culture there where my mum's from is very much just wear whatever you want, especially in the summers. You spend most of it at the beach. You're wearing your swimming things, you're in short shorts, tank tops. And then when I was in Cyprus, it was kind of similar, maybe a little bit more conservative, but same thing, sweltering heat, you're wearing shorts, and it was a bit abnormal to be wearing, you know, long things unless you were part of the older generation who wore kind of like traditional village clothing. But eventually I came to the understanding that the hijab was compulsory. It is a religious obligation for women to fulfill. And even though it's something that should not be forced or imposed on any woman, we can't deny how important it is. And so I thought that I would just start off by testing it out. There was one day when my mum was out and I thought, okay, let me just try leaving the house wearing it, see how I feel. And I loved it. It felt so good wearing it. I felt so excited, jittery. I was nervous as well. I wasn't sure how people would react in general on the street. I thought maybe, you know, within a few seconds I'd get abusive comments being thrown at me. I had no clue how people would react. But alhamdulillah, it was an amazing experience. It made me want to start wearing it even more. I realized this is so perfect for me. It kind of completes my whole modesty journey. It's exactly what I want to do. So I tried to broach the topic to my mum. This was like a year after I became Muslim. And I could tell within a few minutes that she just felt really uncomfortable by the idea that I might start wearing it. Not so much because she was against it per se, but more because she was worried about what her daughter would have to go through. Would I face dangerous situations? Would it limit my opportunities in my career and education? So she was quite concerned about that. So I thought, let me just wait a little bit and not tell her right now that I actually really want to wear it. So that whole year after that conversation took place, I would actually leave the house not wearing it, and then I'd quickly put on my scarf as soon as I leave the house, go out, go to my classes, and then come back during the day. And as soon as I got home, just quickly take it off and go back in. And my mum actually didn't know that I was wearing it that whole year. My brother as well. I kept it quite quiet. I think the good thing with that is that I was able to just explore things at my own pace without the pressure so much. But a year later, I did decide to tell my mum that I really wanted to start wearing it more permanently. And I was really nervous again. I didn't know how she'd react. She was so supportive. I don't know what changed in that year, but she was really, really kind to me, very understanding and open. And in fact, even up until now, sometimes she'll give me as presents like hijab accessories and all sorts. She's just really, really supportive. I also told my dad and my brother, who were very, very supportive too. My brother I knew would be very on board with it, and even though he doesn't believe in God himself and he doesn't subscribe to any religion, he has always been so supportive of me, so I knew that he'd be very okay with me wearing it. I'd say the biggest challenge for me wearing it now is probably sports. I love doing sports. I go to the gym quite a lot. I've done a marathon before, ultra marathon, half Ironman. I want to train for an Ironman in 2026, a full one. So that's quite difficult because it does get really hot, it's uncomfortable, and up until quite recently I used to just wear a cap and a hoodie to the gym, but now I make an effort to wear it properly, which I think is much better. Overall though, I'm just so grateful that I did have that opportunity to dress in that immodest way when I was young. I know it sounds crazy, but in a way it helped put things into perspective. My conviction to dress modestly now is so much stronger as a result of those experiences. The very dark, negative side of a young girl dressing in that way, a young girl transitioning into adulthood. And although women face harassment everywhere, whether you're in a non-Muslim country or Muslim country, you could be in Lahore, Cairo, Marrakesh, it doesn't matter. You will have men looking at you, and it doesn't matter how modestly you dress, you'll get attention. But there is a drastic difference in the attention you get as a woman dressing modestly versus immodestly. And even if I wasn't Muslim now, I would still choose to dress modestly because of the weight it carries to show your body because of the situations it puts you in, because of the danger it puts you in. Overall, it's been a really slow, gradual journey, and I'm happy that I've taken it at that pace, because I think it would have been way too overwhelming had I rushed into it straight away. What was surprising for me when I started wearing it was the misconceptions I had. I assumed that by wearing it I'd start getting like verbally abused everywhere, people would be really mean, it would limit my opportunities. But I think in London, because it's such a big city and everyone's from such diverse backgrounds, if anything, people are quite scared to offend. Now often people will let me off the train first. I'll get really lovely smiles, especially from women, and I've also got a lot more opportunities around like work and education, I guess because now I'm seen as more of a token person to add in because I wear the hijab. I think if I were living in other parts of England, in a smaller village or city, it's probably not as easy to navigate, and especially in other countries around the world. I know that there's some really difficult places to be for women who wear the hijab. In fact, I was in France for some time. I was wearing it there, and France has a very complicated relationship with its Muslim population. At the moment, women can wear it in the public sphere, but you can't wear it in certain jobs. Like if you work in the government, for example, you can't wear it in schools, so there's a lot of restrictions around it, so it makes it very difficult to wear it there. But yeah, I'm really grateful that in London generally people are quite open. Of course you can come across someone who is quite mean-spirited, but overall I think it's quite an easy place. Alhamdulillah, it's quite an easy place to wear the hijab. My advice to anyone out there who is considering wearing it, it does get easier. At the beginning it is very nerve-wracking, and I think the important thing is just to take it gradually. Maybe for some people it's better just to do it all at once and in a very dramatic way all at once, but for me, in my own experiences, just taking it very gradually was what helped and made the conviction a lot stronger, and made me feel confident that I was doing this at the right pace for me. But yeah, this is the end of the video. Thank you so much to anyone who watched, and if there are any other topics you'd like me to explore, just send me a comment. But yeah, thank you very much. Bye.